With that. Yeah.
That's really good. We just did ours in school, so that's really good.
Jessica. Jessica.
I mean, it was like 2 steps, and I was outside.
Get Jessica. Get Jessica.
I didn't
Jessica.
figure I had a whole lot of teaching to do on that.
Is Hudson in class? Okay.
Evacuate. There's the door.
Not this morning, but I will
It's the one y'all
next
keep
year.
trying to sneak in and out of all the time. Not very. I was lucky. Hey, Bill, I've been in that nursery. This was a big hallway. And so, they, class, I was they had to go all the way down to our end to get to a bathroom. That was something else they did. We were too.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the doors are closing, so I guess we'll get started. Beautiful Sunday day here. It's one of those things to obviously be thankful for. All the more so when you put it in perspective of the situation that a lot of folks are dealing with. Uh, we really are blessed in lots of ways. If you're a visitor here, we're glad to have you. We're studying about church leadership in this class, and we've been doing it now. We're a little past the halfway point, I guess, and we're probably just about to the point where you would have assumed we would have started, but there is an awful lot in the scriptures, and we by no means exhausted that have to do with church leadership or with just leadership in among God's people that we seldom refer to, and we try to cover some of those aspects as well because they're important, not the least of which is the idea of servanthood leadership and the example that Jesus gave when he tried to explain what greatness is and what the world's view is compared to the kingdom's view. You're probably already doing this. If you aren't, you should be. Not because I tell you to. I'm no different from you as far as having any authority whatsoever. But you know, whether I say it or someone else says it, you need to be busy doing something in the kingdom. And nobody is exempt. My physical strength is a pale shadow of what never was real great anyway. But that does not excuse me from doing something. So all of us, whether we're a very young member of the kingdom, which we don't have a whole lot of those in here right now because they're in class, but from whether it's the oldest of us to the youngest of us, we need to find our spot and we need to be about the Father's business. And that's part of what leadership involves. I want to start the class by doing some cleanup of loose ends from last time. Probably I'll do that every Sunday because I know there are loose ends, but I'm not always aware of them. And sometimes I am aware of them, but I just figure, okay, you've got to put a stopping place down somewhere. Also, sometimes things go out of your mouth that are not what you intended, or you didn't make yourself clear. And I'm bad about this expression. For those of you who know me well, translate. By that, I simply mean, I figure you pretty much know what I mean by this, and I'm not going to go into some long-winded explanation of what I mean by it. That's okay for some things, but it's not okay for others. A good lesson to start our class with, centers around that very concept. I mentioned as a casual aside, and I'm fond of these casual asides, as you've already learned when I'm teaching, and hopefully some of those are as significant as the main point that I want to get across. But in a, quote, casual aside from last time, I mentioned that although we don't always start our class with a prayer, that I think we ought to be praying regularly for our leaders. I do pray for the leaders of God's kingdom, and I always pray the same prayer. And the prayer basically is that there will be men who are qualified who will shepherd God's people in the right paths. I figure that pretty much covers the broad spectrum. If those men are qualified, and if they're trying to lead God's people in the right paths, that's following that recipe that we've talked about, and it's going to end up turning out just fine. But I didn't stop there. I also made a comment that I pray for the leaders of the world who are upright and trying to do right. That's fine. I also carried it further, and I don't know how you would feel if you were standing here about doing this or not, but I find it, I know athletes do this all the time. They watch video and they check and see how things are. I don't want to watch video of my class with me doing it. To me, that's just downright creepy. I see enough of me when I'm shaving or combing my hair, and half the time I'm not looking then either. It's just on autopilot. You know what that's like. So the last thing I particularly want to do is see how I did and what I did. But I got called out last Sunday, and I should have been, because I left the impression that I do not pray for my enemies. And that's true partly, but it's also with a caveat that goes with it. I do not pray for my enemies in the same way that I pray for others. Specifically, I do not pray for leaders who are my enemies. Now, if you're sitting there, and I'm sorry, but I'm very plain spoken. I already warned you about that. And so I'm not going to mess with this and kind of doctor it up at all. If you're sitting there naive enough to think that you don't have any enemies, you're not watching the news. You don't have to have somebody that lives next door to you that's constantly shooting off shotgun blast at you to be your enemy. Many of your enemies are people you don't even know by name and are mine. So yes, we do have enemies. Sometimes they are big, powerful world leaders, and sometimes they are just people who despise everything we stand for. So having established that we do have enemies. So what is the obligation towards praying for those people? Well, I'd suggest to you that there's a couple of things. What I should have conveyed more accurately and didn't, so that's on me for sure, is that we need to pray that they come to the truth. We need to have an agape love for them. But God never expected the impossible of us. He never expects me to love Vladimir Putin the way I love Linda. Nobody in here has suggested that. There are, as most all of us have been taught again and again, various types of love. And there are Greek words for all of those different types of love. And we're not expected to be big buddies with people who are out to get us. But that doesn't mean we're to hate them either. We are to want what is in their best interest, whether they know what their best interest is or whether they care what their best interest is or not. But that doesn't mean we wish them success. And that's really what I should have tried better to convey when I spoke about praying for my enemies or not praying for them. I do not pray the same for leaders and individuals who oppose the concepts of Christ and God in the same vein that I pray for those who've already arrived at that stage of being on the road and trying to be a servant. So there is that. But no, we're not to ignore them. We are to pray for them. We also, I think, have an example in David where David actually prays that his enemies will be confounded and defeated. So there is that too. I should have done this. Now I may make a bad mistake on my part worse. But Priscilla's the one who called me out on this. Now let's do a lesson about that real quick. After class, she came up here while I was trying to get all of my junk together and wag my bag. And I think the word was, I have a contention with you. She should have known better. You contention. There's 3 syllables right there. So that's already 2 syllables above my pay grade. But anyway, I knew what the word meant. And so she began to explain to me where I had gone wrong on the enemy's part and had not said that as I should have. Point 1. I don't know what her feelings. I know what Linda's feelings are, but I don't think I know what another lady's feelings in this room are specifically about speaking up in a class like this. But she did not speak up in class. She came up here to me after class to straighten me out. She did it in a kind way. It takes a lot of courage to talk to a brother or sister that you think has screwed up. Because I will tell you from bitter experience, 99 times out of 10, they're not going to like it much. Even when your intention is to try to help keep them on track and straighten them out so that they'll be on track. We do want to be on track, don't we? We just don't want anybody else to call our hand on it if we get off track. I'm not expecting you to jump up in the air and do cartwheels. And I don't expect that out of me. And maybe at the moment we might not even be all that thrilled about it. But we need to care when somebody has enough nerve and enough concern about us and our soul to try to help keep us on track. So don't get yourself all in a dither if somebody says, hey, you need to take another look at this. I've told you before publicly, and some of you privately, I want to be straightened out. That is not a politically correct statement that we know ought to be true. I don't like screwing up. Very few people do. But I'd a whole lot rather be straightened out than it end up causing problems for eternity. How about you? Thank you. There are a couple of other things. One thing that I mentioned, and I've mentioned this a couple of times before, we have no clue how difficult the job of elder is, except for a handful of people in here, and I don't even know who they are. I know two who they are. Jim is starting a class for new converts. We're in a wonderful stage now because we've got lots of them. I put in a plug for that class. If you know somebody who needs to be in that class, or if you're in here and you're a new convert, you need to be in that class. One of the things I've observed in the kingdom over the decades of my life is that we have these guys that come in and they become Christians, and we think, okay, we got them baptized. This is not scriptural, by the way, for anybody who's listening, but it's a very common aspect. We got them baptized. Okay, job's done. They're just getting started. Now, I'm not a very good grower of plants. Well, if you saw some of the plants that are in our landscape, you'd know that I'm not a very good grower of plants because they're as brown and dead as they can be. But I know this. When you plant something, you can't just walk away from it unless it's a weed or a dandelion or they thrive. But the good stuff takes care, and especially a lot of care at the beginning. Encourage the people that are in that class. Encourage Jim and move forward with it. Oh, you're going all over the place now, aren't you, Ron? Yeah, I am, but I think every piece of it is important. Jim is not here, and that's the reason. But we've got two of our elders that are here, and there are other men in here who possibly have been elders at one time or another. In fact, it just occurred to me that I know of at least one. So they get it. But most of us don't get it. If you've ever listened to anybody talk to you about your job, and teachers get to do that regularly. Well, I wish I had a cushy job where you had the summers off, and and all you had to do was work from 7 to 3 or something like that. I would like to just take my two hands and hug their neck. In Christian love, of course. Because I'm thinking, hey, and oftentimes there are people that are working in a plant where they have 6 weeks of paid vacation and then a couple of other weeks like Christmas and stuff. And if they work longer than their hours, that's called overtime. And so, I could go down there. No, you don't have a clue, so don't talk to me about my job. We don't have a clue, brothers and sisters, about what an elder is doing or how hard the job is. And I'm saying that as someone who doesn't have a clue either. I'm just reminding you, if you think, well, all they've got to do is sit around somewhere and think up, okay, we might do this and we might do that. It's a little bit tougher than that. And having made that observation again last Sunday, Jim came up to me and said, You can use this as an example if you want to. So I thought, yeah, I'm gonna. And by yesterday, as I was looking over my notes, it occurred to me, okay, I don't know if I've got all the shades of this exactly right or not. I know I remember the point, but I'm not sure I remember the particulars. So I called him up and said, okay, I do want to use that. Have I got it straight? Here's basically what he told me. For about 20 years, up in southern Illinois and over in Missouri, as a preacher, he sat in on elders and deacons meetings or elders meetings again and again and again. So, okay, he's hearing stuff. That's my comment. He's hearing stuff. He's hearing stuff that the general congregation doesn't know, probably doesn't need to know. So he thinks he knows kind of what it's like from the inside as an elder. And his comment to me was, I didn't have a clue until I actually became an elder. That 20 years didn't do me near as much good as you might have thought it would sitting in the meetings. It's different when you've got the responsibility on your shoulders. It's different when you're standing here than it is sitting out there. You better be paying attention. You better be trying to apply it. But I better be getting it straight, plus I better be paying attention, and I better be trying to apply it. There's more responsibility on my shoulders right now than there is on yours. And those of you who teach other classes, ditto for you, of course. That job is a hard job, whether I understand the particulars of it or not. Many of you have said, yes, what you said, yes. I've been at a place where it was that way, or it was this way, or we had to deal with this and what you said. But Jim, in this instance, simply said, surprised me, and I didn't think it would. We looked at some qualifications last time, and the third thing that I want to do deals with one of those qualifications. So I'm just going to skim through what we did last time. These are found in Timothy 3. I'd like you to be turning in that direction. And you're going to be really close to Titus 1. So that's kind of where we'll be at for the bulk of our study from here on for a while. Where those list of the formal qualifications as we think of them are there. The first one being, as we noted, orego. The idea of you've got to be wanting the job, not the leadership power that goes with it. No. But you've got to be wanting to take on the responsibility of doing the best you can to lead God's people in the right way. The idea is wanting to serve. If you don't have that attitude, then automatically, no matter how fine a man you are, and we're thinking specifically of elders now at this point, so that's why I'm excluding you ladies. No matter how fine a man you are, no matter how qualified you are in all the other realms, being an elder is not for you. The idea, then there are two words, one found in Timothy 3, the idea of being above reproach. And then in Titus 1, 6 and 7, the concept of being blameless. And I read a quote to you, and I meant to do this, and I let it slip my mind because I was trying to squeeze one more qualification in. The idea in Titus of being blameless, ananklatos, blameless, above reproach. And I read this quote from Vine. Vine is one of those people you can go to get more detailed explanation or definition for a word where you're not actually clear on. It's not the same as Webster's because he comes at it from a religious viewpoint. So, sometimes going to Webster's to find the definition for a religious term is maybe not the best idea in the world. But Vine is usually a good source. And I read this quote, not merely an acquittal, but the absence of even a charge or accusation against a person. Mr. Vine, I'm sure, is a whole lot smarter than me, but he's wrong. This is one of those times where you really always need to think about whoever you're listening to, and you ought to be thinking about it hard and looking at it with a questioning mind, as you should be everything that comes out of my mouth or any other human's mouth. Not merely acquittal, but the absence of even a charge or accusation against a person. So what about Jesus? Mr. Vine overlooked a very fundamental thing, in my opinion. Do we all agree that Jesus was blameless? I think we do. But were charges still leveled? Were accusations still made? Hey, that was the hook that they were looking for to get rid of him anyway. We didn't have to say they were true. Over the last 5 years of my career, I found myself slandered almost on a monthly basis, as well as just about everybody I worked with. Jesus was as innocent as a lamb, and yet false witnesses were brought up against him. And since they couldn't get any real evidence against him, they paid a couple of guys to lie. Blameless? Yes. But free from any charge or accusation? I would suggest to you that in today's world especially, but it's the only world I know, maybe in ages past it's been somewhat different. I don't know for sure. But in today's world, if you stand up for anything, start getting ready to duck the rocks. If you stand for anything, you're going to make somebody mad. I have absolutely no doubt that I've made some of you mad. I'm not talking about a sister who loves me enough to straighten me out. I'm talking about people that are sitting there and never going to say a word, but if I had any other place to go in the world, I'd go. I sure don't like sitting in that class. Who does he think he is? I think I'm about like you. Until this becomes my source. And if you don't like the source, take it up with the source. Not, as we say, don't shoot the messenger. Because as important as this is, I won't be saying, now, folks, I know y'all all good people. I know y'all all want to do right. Let's try to do good, okay? Rah, rah, rah for the kingdom. We're not going to do that. This is serious stuff. This is hard stuff. This is a technical study, and the application of it is really difficult. So let's take it seriously then. So these three things. Okay. Straighten yourself up, Ron, and be careful about what you say and how you say it. 2, an elder's job is extremely difficult and you don't really have a clue unless you've been there as to how hard it is. I guess we could do a subhead under that one that just pops into my mind. That being the case, let's give them encouragement every time we can. And let's straighten them out and help them work it out if they're in an area where they've made a mistake. And 3, everybody's going to find themselves being accused sooner or later. But an elder should, as far as they are able to, be someone that everyone that knows of them even looks up to them as a straight arrow type guy. That's really important. Our reputation out in the community as well as among ourselves is paramount. And it can't be neglected. The last thing that we got into, and I only half jokingly commented on that old cliche of being saved by the bell. A husband of one wife, faithful to his wife, committed to his wife. It is as clear as it can be that elders are to be married men. Yeah, but Ron, don't mess with the recipe. Yeah, but Ron, this is a good man here. And he's always at all the church services. And he does all these good things. Great. Is he married? No. Well, he needs to go out and find him a woman. I can laugh at that a little bit, and if you choose to, that's fine. But it's still true. If he aspires to be an elder, he needs to be thinking about becoming a married man and looking for a suitable mate. He's also required to have children, but that's another story, and we're not going to go there on this one right now. I ask you 2 questions that I don't have answers for. But it is something that people have had to deal with. And if you are an elder, or you're thinking of becoming an elder possibly sometime, it needs to be in your mind. Can an elder be scripturally divorced and remarried? Can an elder whose spouse has died while he is serving as an elder continue as an elder? The easiest thing on this particular qualification is to say, God didn't want a polygamist. But it's a lot more complicated than that sometimes. There have been instances where these 2 things have come up. Generally, if I think I could steer us in the right direction, I would at least give an opinion. I'm ready to move on. I do have an opinion, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Let's look at 1 Timothy 3:2. The idea of being temperate, self-controlled, sober-minded. The King James uses the word vigilant. The Greek word is nephales. Nephales. Vincent, who also does word studies, says this means to be calm, dispassionate, circumspect. It's the idea of having the clarity of mind and good judgment that's needed to refute false teachers. Now, you know, as much as we find it unpleasant to be reminded of, I can't hardly get through a lesson without pointing out that so many congregations have fallen away because of bad leaders. And if that leadership that was intact before that happened had been able to nail it in the bud, a lot of harm could have been avoided. But elders have to be perceptive enough. They have to have the best judgment in order to be able to refute false teachers. Let me say this plainly. This eliminates many, many good men. And if you are one of them, start working on fixing it. Shall I be playing? Oh, yeah, Ron, go ahead. You open up the building every time there's services. You go around with the thankless job of setting all the thermostats, knowing full well half the people are going to be burning up and half of them are going to be freezing. You make sure that the communion is set out. You drive the church bus. You lock up after services. Some lady needs a light bulb screwed in, and she's 87 and has no business being on a ladder. I'll be right there. You clean out the gutters, by the way, because you see her gutters are just overflowing with leaves. You get a call at 3 a.m. Could you take me to the hospital? My husband's in serious pain and we need help. A Cornelius type critter. A really fine person. Nobody's saying they aren't. But this is one of, if I were going to go to a top 3, and that would be foolish because if you mess with any part of the recipe, it's all messed up. But if I were going to go for a top 3 of things that matter, this is one that matters so much. It's not good enough to be a great guy and a great servant. As important as the service part is, if you don't have Bible knowledge, you are a danger to that congregation. If you don't have Bible knowledge, you can be a great servant, you can be a great Christian, and you can be a true asset to any group that you're a part of. But if you don't have Bible knowledge, no, you do not be in a position where you try to lead people to heaven when you don't know anything about it. Let me be plainer. Boy, did you sleep on a burr last night? No. But if God's going to nail me on Judgment Day, it's not going to be because I tiptoed around this. You won't be able to look over at me and say, you were supposed to be teaching us about this, so why didn't you? You can look over at me and point the finger at me, and I won't want to look you in the eye for a lot of things, but this is not going to be one of them. Don't you even think about being an elder if you don't know the difference between the New Testament and the Old Testament. Don't you even think about being an elder if you can't understand the difference between the kind of book that the book of Luke is and a book like Galatians. Don't you even think about being an elder if you can't tell somebody how to become a Christian. Don't you even think about being an elder if you can't open up the Bible to a book, and I won't even tell you which one, and say, here's an example and an example and an example and an example of how people became Christians. You notice I'm not saying that you need to be able to quote all kinds of scripture. I still say my favorite verse is where it says somewhere, you know. But I do know how to use a concordance. Or even lazier these days for me, I'll just Google a verse because I may remember a part of the verse, or I may remember it usually in King James because that's the way I was brought up hearing it, and I can find it. But don't even think about becoming a leader of God's people if you don't know diddly about the scriptures. That's what we're about. Am I mad at y'all? No. Of course I'm not. But I'm just saying we don't need people that don't know what they're doing. You keep on driving that truck. You keep on screwing light bulbs. You keep on coming to worship and being a good example of a good, faithful man. But you stay out of the leadership role until you learn something. And if you want it bad enough, if you really desire it, like qualification number 1, then if you will get a CD player or a jump drive and earbuds, and if you will play the Bible when you're asleep at night over and over and over, it will all come to you. No! It comes to you just like it came to the ancient Egyptians. I'm sorry. Do we tell our athletes in high school or even earlier, all you got to do is just watch video of how it's done and just watch the video over and over again, and you're going to be the best basketball player, the best baseball. Just watch the video. You just have it on maybe at night when the TV in your room. You can go ahead and go to sleep. It'll come to you. No. Studying's hard work. That's why most of us don't like it. I'll tell you one thing, studying is hard. Learning is fun only after you've done it. Knowing stuff is fun. Learning that stuff is not fun. Anybody in here who's learned to play the piano gets that. Learning to play, not so much fun. Being able to play, I guess, is fun. I wouldn't know. Looks like it would be. So if you are a good man and you desire it, start studying. And if you don't know how to, ask somebody that you think probably does and start growing. But if you can't do some ABCs like some of those specifics that I just rattled off, you know, if you're going to be a lawyer, you have to pass the bar. If you're going to be a doctor, you have to be certified. What would you think of it if you thought you might be an elder and they called you in to that office over there and said, we got a few questions we need to ask you? I'm not so sure, but what? That's not a good idea. Oh, we wouldn't want to embarrass anybody. Then don't put yourself in a spot where you are going to be embarrassed. We all need to be studying better. I know that. I sure know that. But a leader who doesn't know is a real danger to the whole congregation. A lot of congregations would still be faithful if their leaders knew better. They just didn't know better, so they thought, well, one way's as good as another. You've been patient. You put up with yelling. But I'm not yelling at you. I'm emphasizing how serious it is. And we'll start on new qualifications next time.